Dalton Merrick stood in the center of something impossible. 3 drilling rigs formed a perfect triangle across his western pasture, each positioned with precision that made his engineer's mind recoil. He pulled out his phone, opened the compass app. 120 degrees between each rig. Exact, not approximate. Military precision for what should have been exploratory drilling. The silence hit him next. No birds, no insects, just the smell of diesel hanging thick in the morning air, the kind that came from recent operation, not abandoned equipment. His left arm began to throb, the one that had never healed right, the one that remembered what happened when corporate efficiency prioritized extraction over safety. Fresh boot prints surrounded each rig, not work boots, tactical treads, the kind security contractors wore. Someone had been here during the night, moving with coordination that spoke of planning, resources, and the confidence of people who believed they had every right to be here. 23 days since Dalton had signed the foreclosure papers. 23 days of believing he had finally escaped the world that had broken him. The ranch had sold for a fraction of market value at auction because the previous owner had simply walked away without explanation. 200 acres in western Montana, decent house, water rights included. Dalton had spent every dollar of his settlement money on it. 12 years as a mining engineer. 12 years of watching profit margins override safety protocols. 12 years of filing concerns that would be noted and ignored. The day 3 tons of collapsed scaffolding shattered his arm, management had asked if he could finish his shift. The settlement had taken 3 years to extract from Apex Mineral Holdings. 3 years of depositions and medical evaluations and lawyers arguing his partially functioning limb was adequate compensation for a career ended at 35. He had bought this ranch to never think about corporations again. But now he crouched beside the nearest drilling rig, examining the housing. Still warm. He checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. They had operated between 2 and 5 in the morning, professional and silent. Survey markers dotted the ground every 50 feet, small metal stakes with numbered tags. He recognized the cataloging system immediately. Recognized more than that. Recognized the logo stamped on each marker. Apex Mineral Holdings, the same company. Out of thousands of mineral operations across the United States, it was the same company that had fought his injury claim, that had valued quarterly earnings over spinal damage, that had treated him like a line item cost to be minimized. Dalton pulled out his phone and searched the county property records website, typed in his deed number. The page loaded slowly, then displayed his purchase details. Surface rights only. The word sat there like a diagnosis he had been too naive to request earlier. He clicked through to historical records, found a document from 1942, transferring mineral rights to Apex for $1,200. His phone rang. Unknown number. He stared at it for 3 seconds before answering. Mr. Merrick, I see you have been researching your deed. That is wise, though it will not change what we own beneath your feet. The voice was female, professional, utterly confident. My name is Victoria Gaines. I represent Apex Mineral Holdings. We need to meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., at your residence. This is not a request. The line went dead. Dalton looked at his phone, then at the drilling rigs, then at the survey markers marching across his land like an occupying army. They had been watching. They knew the moment he discovered the equipment, the moment he went online. 23 days of believing he owned something that mattered. 23 days of being wrong. Victoria Gaines arrived at 8:59 a.m. in a black SUV that looked like it cost more than the ranch itself. She emerged wearing a charcoal suit cut for boardrooms and courtrooms, carrying a slim leather briefcase that suggested she traveled light because she never lost. 2 men remained in the vehicle. Both wore dark suits. Both watched the house with the stillness of people trained to observe and report. One of them held a tablet, fingers moving occasionally across the screen, logging something, recording something. When Dalton shifted his weight on the porch, the man made a note. Dalton met Victoria at the bottom of the porch steps. He did not invite her closer. This was still his property, whatever documents she carried. Mr. Merrick, thank you for your time. She did not extend her hand. Let me be direct. Apex Mineral Holdings owns subsurface mineral rights to this property. We have held them since 1942. Your foreclosure purchase granted you surface rights. The land, the structures, the water. Everything below 20 feet belongs to us. She opened her briefcase with the practiced efficiency of someone who had delivered this speech before. We have identified economically viable deposits beneath your property. We need surface access to extract what we own." Dalton kept his expression neutral, despite his pulse hammering. The auction documents made no mention of split rights, because most banks do not track mineral rights separately. Most property owners in Montana have no idea their deeds are incomplete. It is remarkably common, actually, dating back to when companies purchased subsurface access during resource booms. Victoria pulled out a folder, extended it. "Your copy of the original transfer agreement, county filings, geological assessment." He took it, but did not open it. "And the drilling you conducted without permission? Confirmation drilling to verify deposit composition and extraction viability. We took core samples, all legal under reasonable access provisions for mineral rights holders." She produced a second, thinner folder. "This is our compensation offer. $50,000 for a permanent surface easement. We need approximately 10 acres for staging and equipment. You maintain your residence and remaining acreage. $50,000. Dalton had paid $320 for the property. "And if I decline? Then we pursue our legal right to reasonable access regardless of cooperation. Montana statute is quite clear that mineral rights holders have priority when extraction is economically justified." Victoria's smile carried no warmth. "The legal process will require months and cost you significantly more than $50,000 in attorney fees. Or you can accept fair compensation now." Fair. The word hung between them like an insult. One of the men in the SUV opened his door slightly, boot touching gravel, then pulled it closed again. A reminder. A display. "I understand you left the mining industry after an incident." Victoria's tone shifted, became almost conversational. "Apex Frontier Operations 2012. Structural collapse. I am sorry that happened. Though I hope you understand that safety protocols and extraction operations are quite different matters. We are very careful about how we work." Dalton's left arm throbbed. She knew. Of course she knew. They had researched him as thoroughly as they had surveyed his land. The message was clear. "We know who you are. We know what broke you. We know you cannot afford to fight us. I need time to review these documents and consult legal counsel. 48 hours. Mr. Merrick. After that, our attorneys file for compulsory access through district court." Victoria returned to the SUV without waiting for acknowledgement. The man with the tablet made one final notation as they drove away. Dalton stood in the driveway holding folders that felt heavier than their paperweight, watching dust settle behind the vehicle. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to demonstrate how thoroughly they had already won. And they had brought his past with them like a weapon they could deploy whenever necessary. Dalton spent Friday analyzing Victoria's documents and making calls to attorneys who quoted $5,000 retainers before discussing strategy. By Saturday afternoon, he had confirmed the 1942 transfer was legally recorded, properly notarized, and apparently legitimate. But something about the signature bothered him. The ink pressure varied. The letters trembled. It looked less like confident agreement and more like someone signing under conditions that made their hand shake. His phone rang at 4:15 p.m. Local area code, unfamiliar number. "Mr. Merrick, my name is Iris Holloway. Word travels in small towns when Apex shows up at someone's property. I went through this 8 years ago, lost everything fighting them, but I learned things about how they operate. Things you need to know before you decide what to do next." Her voice carried the texture of someone who had survived something that should have destroyed them. "Can I come by?" She arrived 30 minutes later in a truck that looked like it predated emission standards. Mid-50s, gray hair cropped short, jeans and flannel shirt worn soft from years of use. She carried a leather satchel that had clearly accompanied her through multiple legal battles, scuffed and reinforced at the stress points. They sat at his kitchen table. Iris opened the 1942 document and studied it with the intensity of someone reading a language most people did not speak. "This signature." She tapped the trembling ink. "See how it starts controlled but deteriorates? That is not old age. That is fear or coercion." She pulled out reading glasses, examined the notary seal. "And this stamp placement is wrong. Should be adjacent to the signature line, not below. Notaries are trained to specific procedures. When they deviate, it usually means the signing was irregular, rushed, possibly performed under duress. You think Apex forced the sale? I think 1942 was 3 months after Pearl Harbor. Government was pressuring rural landowners to grant mineral access for war production. Some companies used that pressure as cover for outright intimidation. If the original owner signed under duress, the transfer might be voidable, which would invalidate everything Apex claims. Iris pulled out her phone, showed him a spreadsheet. I have been tracking this. 7 properties in this county alone where Apex holds mineral rights from the 40s. 6 of those original owners abandoned their land within 2 years of signing. 1 died in what was ruled an equipment accident. The kitchen felt colder. Outside, something scraped against the side of the house. Probably a branch. Probably. In my case, Iris continued, they started with a reasonable offer. When I refused, my well got contaminated. My fence lines were cut. Cattle wandered onto the highway. All explainable as accidents or negligence. All impossible to prove as sabotage. 2 neighbors who supported me had barn fires within the same month. Both ruled electrical faults. She met his eyes. They do not use obvious force. They create circumstances that make fighting them so exhausting and expensive that you eventually take whatever they offer just to make it stop. Dalton's phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. He opened it. The image showed his water well. A small puncture in the casing. Diesel fuel spreading across the ground in a dark puddle that reflected afternoon light. His breath caught. His left arm flared with phantom pain from an injury 12 years gone. The room tilted slightly before he steadied himself against the table. Iris looked at the photo, then at him with the calm of someone who had seen this pattern before. That photograph means you have less than 48 hours before something else happens. They escalate in stages. Well contamination, property damage. Then they start making your life unlivable in ways that look like bad luck to everyone except you. The scraping sound came again from outside. Louder this time. Definitely not a branch. Dalton, you need to decide right now if you can afford to fight this. Because once they move past legal intimidation to active sabotage, there is no going back. They will make you wish you had taken the $50,000 when it was still on the table. Dalton moved to the window. The scraping came from the north side of the house where the electrical panel was mounted. He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, felt the weight of it in his right hand while his left arm continued its phantom ache. Iris followed him outside, her own phone out and recording. The electrical panel cover hung open, swinging slightly in the wind that had not existed a moment ago. Fresh scratches marked the lock mechanism. Someone had pried it open recently enough that metal shavings still clung to the edges. Inside, 3 of the breaker switches had been flipped to positions that were not quite off but not quite on either. Deliberate sabotage designed to look like malfunction. Dalton recognized the technique from safety training. Partial contact created resistance, heat, eventually fire if left long enough. They were here while we were inside. Iris took photographs from multiple angles. Probably while you were reading the text message. Classic misdirection. Show you one threat while positioning another. Dalton checked the ground. Boot prints. Same tactical tread pattern from the drilling site. But also, tire tracks. Different from Victoria's SUV. Smaller vehicle, wider wheelbase. Someone in a truck had parked behind his barn where it could not be seen from the house. He followed the tracks, Iris staying close. The trail led to his equipment shed. The padlock lay on the ground, sheared cleanly through with bolt cutters. Inside, someone had gone through his tools with systematic efficiency. Nothing obviously missing, but everything had been moved. Examined. Cataloged. His ranch maintenance records were stacked on the workbench, pages marked with small pencil notations. They had documented his equipment, his resources, probably his financial limitations. But they had missed something, or maybe they had not cared. Dalton kept his important documents in a fireproof lockbox hidden inside an empty 50-gallon drum labeled used oil. He retrieved it now, carried it back to the house with Iris watching the perimeter. Inside the box were his settlement documents from Apex, medical records from the accident, and something he had almost forgotten. A folder from his last week working for Apex Frontier Operations. Incident reports he had filed about safety violations. Equipment maintenance logs showing machinery being pushed past recommended service intervals, and a memo marked confidential from regional management to site supervisors. The subject line read, Cost Optimization Through Deferred Maintenance Protocols. It detailed how to delay safety upgrades while maintaining plausible deniability if accidents occurred. Dalton had kept it as insurance, something to produce if Apex ever challenged his injury claim in court. They had settled before he needed to use it. Iris read the memo twice. This is a pattern. They prioritize extraction over safety at operational sites. They force property owners off land through intimidation, and they get away with it because they are large enough to absorb lawsuits and skilled enough to make everything look legal. She pulled up her spreadsheet again, scrolled to a section Dalton had not seen before. 4 of the 7 property owners who abandoned their land. 2 died in vehicle accidents within 5 years. 1 from a house fire. 1 from what was called a hunting accident. All investigated. All closed as accidental. But 4 out of 7 is not normal statistical distribution. Dalton's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another text. This time it was a photograph of his truck, parked in the driveway where he had left it. Except in the image, the rear tire was visibly flat. He walked outside. The tire was fine, perfectly inflated, which meant the photograph had been staged, which meant they had the capability and willingness to sabotage his vehicle whenever they chose. They were telling him they could trap him here, isolate him, cut him off from help anytime they wanted. He looked at Iris, at the memo from 12 years ago, at the pattern of deaths and accidents and property transfers that benefited one company across multiple decades. How do we prove this is not just a series of unfortunate coincidences? We find the original property owner from 1942, or what happened to him after he signed. Because men who voluntarily sell mineral rights for $1,200 do not usually disappear, but men who are forced to sign under threat absolutely do. The County Historical Archives occupied the basement of a building that had served as the original land office in 1873. Iris knew the archivist, a woman named Margaret who remembered when records were kept in ledgers instead of databases. Sunday morning, the building should have been closed. Margaret opened it anyway after Iris called in a favor built on years of friendship and shared battles against entities larger than both of them. The property deed from 1942 listed the original owner as Thomas Garrett Whitmore. Margaret pulled physical records from fireproof cabinets that smelled like old paper and preservation chemicals. Whitmore had purchased the land in 1938, 4 years before selling the mineral rights. Paid cash. Census records showed he was a widower, 53 years old, no children listed. The mineral rights transfer document was there, the signature matching what Dalton and Iris had already seen. But Margaret produced something else. A death certificate dated October 1942. 7 months after the mineral rights sale. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Location, irrigation canal on his own property. October 19, 42 would have been after harvest, Margaret said quietly. Irrigation canals run shallow that time of year. Man would have to be unconscious or held down to drown in 8 inches of water. She pulled another document. Sheriff's report from the investigation. Brief, perfunctory. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Ruled accidental. Case closed within 48 hours. But paper clipped to the back of the report was something that should not have been there. A handwritten note on letterhead from Apex Mineral Holdings Regional Office. Typed message, matter resolved per discussion, property secured, mineral access confirmed, signed by someone named Consolidated Acquisitions Manager. The note was dated 2 days before Whitmore's death. Dalton felt cold spread through his chest. They documented it. They actually kept a paper trail of what they planned to do, or what they had done. Iris photographed every page with her phone. This note was probably supposed to be destroyed. Instead, it got filed with the sheriff's report by mistake or by someone who wanted insurance. Margaret retrieved property transfer records for the land itself after Whitmore's death. Estate sold at auction 6 weeks later, purchased by a company called Frontier Development Corporation for $1,800, substantially below market value even for that era. I can cross-reference Frontier Development, Margaret said, typing into a desktop computer that looked 20 years old. Here, Frontier Development Corporation, incorporated 1939, parent company, Apex Mineral Holdings. They had not just taken the mineral rights. They had taken the entire property after eliminating the owner, then sold it years later, probably when commodity prices dipped, retaining the mineral rights for when extraction became profitable again. Dalton's ranch, his refuge, his last dollar investment in a life he thought he controlled, sat on land that Apex had acquired through what could only be called murder. His phone vibrated. Not a call. An email, from an address that was just random letters and numbers. No subject line. He opened it despite every instinct saying not to. The message contained a single attachment. A PDF document. Geological survey dated 3 weeks ago. The same survey Victoria had mentioned. But this version had details he had not seen in her sanitized presentation. The lithium deposits were not just viable. They were estimated at $2.4 billion at current market rates. And the rare earth elements beneath that, critical for military electronics and advanced manufacturing, added another $6 billion. $8.4 billion beneath 200 acres. Beneath land he had bought for $320,000. The email disappeared as he read. Deleted remotely. Someone had sent it, let him see it for exactly 90 seconds, then erased it to ensure he could not prove what he had learned. Iris saw his expression. What? The offer was $50,000. The actual value is $8 billion. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. And someone inside their operation just told me that. Anonymously. Someone wants me to know what I am really fighting for. Or someone wants me to understand how badly I am outmatched. I cannot tell which. Dalton called the sheriff's office Monday morning. Explained the sabotage, the threats, the pattern of intimidation. The dispatcher took his information with professional efficiency and said a deputy would be out within the hour. 3 hours later, Deputy Carson arrived in a patrol vehicle that had seen better decades. Mid-40s, overweight in the way that suggested desk work rather than field duty. He examined the electrical panel with minimal interest and the bolt cutter's damage with even less. Could be vandals. You are pretty isolated out here. Kids sometimes drive out to remote properties looking for trouble. Carson took photographs with his phone that looked more like documentation for a report nobody would read than actual evidence collection. As for the text messages without knowing who sent them, there is not much we can investigate. Could be pranks. Could be someone trying to scare you off the property. Hard to say. Dalton showed him Iris's spreadsheet on his tablet. 7 properties, 4 deaths, pattern of mineral rights acquisitions. Carson scrolled through it with the expression of someone reviewing a menu at a restaurant they had no intention of eating at. Ma'am, I know Iris Holloway. Known her for years. She means well, but she has been on a crusade about Apex since they bought her out. Sometimes people see patterns where there is just coincidence. 4 deaths over 80 years across 7 properties? That is not statistically unusual for rural Montana. He handed the tablet back. Look, I understand you feel threatened. I will file a report about the vandalism. But unless you have concrete evidence of who is doing this, or video footage, or witnesses, there is not much the department can do. Property crimes like this rarely get solved unless someone gets caught in the act. After Carson left, Iris made a phone call. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in her truck, driving to meet someone she said they needed to talk to. A county maintenance worker named Russell, who had been employed by the roads department for 30 years. They met him at a rest stop 15 miles outside town, away from security cameras and regular traffic. Russell was in his 60s, weathered face carrying the geography of decades working outdoors. He spoke quietly, checking the road constantly as if expecting someone to appear. I do contract work sometimes. Extra money. Last month Apex hired me to install something on the county telecommunications tower. Signal booster, they said, for their drilling operations. Except it was not pointed at their drill sites. It was pointed at the valley where most of the rural properties are located, including yours. Mr. Merrick, I am no expert, but I worked in military communications before I came here. What they installed looks a lot like surveillance equipment, the kind that intercepts cell signals, monitors calls, tracks locations. Dalton felt his stomach tighten. Every call he had made, every text, every time he searched property records online. They had been listening. Deputy Carson, Iris said carefully. How long has he been with the sheriff's department? 12 years, but his brother-in-law works for Apex, Regional Security Division. Been there since the company expanded operations in Montana. Russell pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet. A group of men at what looked like a company barbecue. He pointed to one. That is Carson's brother-in-law. That is the sheriff himself. And that one there, that is Judge Hendricks from District Court. The same judge who would hear any compulsory access petition Apex files. He put the photograph away. I am telling you this because I have a daughter. She is buying her first house next year. I do not want her living in a place where companies can do whatever they want, because they have bought enough people to make the law irrelevant. But I also cannot afford to lose my job or have an accident. So I am telling you this once. And then we never met. Russell drove away, leaving Dalton and Iris standing in the empty rest stop parking lot, with the knowledge that the system designed to protect property rights had been compromised at every level. Sheriff, judge, probably prosecutors. The 48-hour deadline Victoria had given was not a legal time frame. It was performance theater for an outcome already decided. Dalton's phone rang. He almost did not answer. But the number was different. Local, but not one he recognized from previous threats. He answered. The voice was male, young, speaking quickly, as if on a timer. They are coming tonight. 3 a.m. They will make it look like you tried to start a fire and it got out of control. Get out now or document everything. Your choice. The line went dead. Dalton did not run. Instead, he prepared. Iris helped him position cameras at 6 points around the property. Cheap wildlife cameras purchased at a sporting goods store an hour away with cash, so there would be no digital trail. They aimed them at the house, the barn, the electrical panel, the well, documenting every angle where sabotage might occur. He backed up all their photographs and documents to a cloud storage account created under a name that was not his own. Sent copies to Iris's email, to Margaret at the archives, to 3 journalists who covered corporate misconduct. If something happened to him, the evidence would survive. At midnight, he sent Iris home despite her protests. Whatever was coming, he would not risk her safety. His left arm ached steadily now, phantom pain mixing with real tension. He made coffee, knowing he would not sleep. Checked the cameras every 15 minutes on his laptop. The property remained still under a moon that provided just enough light to see shapes but not details. At 2:47 a.m., headlights appeared on his access road. 2 vehicles, not the black SUV. These were pickups, work trucks with toolboxes and no visible company markings. They parked behind the barn, out of sight from the main road. 4 men got out, moving with coordination that suggested planning and practice. They wore dark clothing but not uniforms, faces covered with bandanas. One carried what looked like a gas can. Another had a toolbox. They moved toward the house. Dalton activated his phone's camera, positioned himself where he could film through a window without being silhouetted. The men approached the electrical panel first, one of them producing what looked like an accelerant sprayer, not gasoline. Something designed to burn hot and fast. They were creating an ignition point that would look like faulty wiring caused the fire, just as the earlier sabotage had set up the narrative. But they had made a mistake. In their confidence, in their assumption that Dalton would either be gone or too afraid to resist, they had become careless. The man with the sprayer had his bandana slip briefly, just 3 seconds. Just enough for the camera to catch his face in the porch light he probably thought was off. Dalton recognized him, not from Apex, from the sheriff's department. Deputy Martin, who worked night patrol and had been at his property twice before on unrelated calls. The men worked quickly, professional but rushed. They wanted to be done before 3 a.m., probably to maintain their alibi timeline. When they finished rigging the panel, they moved to the barn. Dalton shifted positions, kept filming. They were placing accelerants there too, creating multiple ignition points to ensure the fire would spread too fast to contain, making it look like he had been careless with equipment storage, that he had created the conditions for his own destruction. They left at 3:11 a.m. Dalton waited until their taillights disappeared before moving. He checked the cameras, confirmed all 6 had recorded, downloaded the footage immediately to 3 separate locations. Only then did he approach the electrical panel with gloved hands and a flashlight. They had been thorough. The incendiary device was sophisticated, designed to ignite 30 minutes after they left, giving them time to establish alibis and respond as first responders to a tragic accident. He photographed it from every angle without touching anything, documented the chemical compounds, the timer mechanism, the professional installation that no random vandal would possess the skills or resources to create. His phone rang at 3:21, the anonymous number from earlier, the same young male voice. Did you get what you needed? Yes, who are you? Someone who is tired of cleaning up their mistakes. The footage you have proves deputy involvement, but it will not be enough. Victoria Gaines does not get her hands dirty. She will deny knowledge, claim these were rogue actors. You need her directly connected or this ends with you buried and them paying a small fine for contractor misconduct. A pause. Check your email. You have one chance to make this work. Do not waste it. The call ended. Dalton opened his email. One new message. Subject line, meeting location, Wednesday noon. The message contained coordinates to what looked like a remote section of national forest land. And a single sentence. She will be there to finalize property acquisition from the original owner's estate. Bring everything. Dalton arrived at the National Forest coordinates 90 minutes early. He parked a mile away and hiked in, carrying a backpack with 3 phones, 2 recording devices, and printed copies of everything he had documented. Iris was not with him, but she knew where he was and had instructions to contact federal authorities if he did not check in by 2 p.m. The clearing matched the coordinates exactly, a place where logging roads met fire breaks, remote enough for privacy, but accessible enough for vehicles. He positioned himself in the tree line where he could observe without being seen. At 11:45, Victoria's SUV arrived. She stepped out alone, which surprised him until he saw the second vehicle, a white sedan with government plates. 2 men in suits emerged, and Dalton recognized the younger one from Russell's photograph. Not Apex Security. FBI. The informant had not sent him into a trap. He had sent him to witness Victoria incriminating herself to federal agents she believed were local officials she had bought. Dalton activated all 3 phones, each streaming to different cloud accounts, and stepped into the clearing. Victoria's expression shifted from surprise to controlled anger. The 2 agents immediately identified themselves. Special Agents Morrison and Chen, FBI Public Corruption Task Force. They had been investigating Apex Mineral Holdings for 18 months, following complaints from multiple states about property acquisition practices that looked like organized crime. Mr. Merrick, we have been monitoring this situation since you filed your first property record search online. Agent Morrison spoke calmly. Your informant has been cooperating with us for 6 months. He is Victoria Gaines's legal assistant, assigned to document property acquisitions. When he discovered the pattern of deaths and falsified documents, he contacted us. We have been building a case, but we needed Victoria to take action against you personally to establish conspiracy to commit murder. Victoria's composure cracked. I was conducting legitimate business negotiations. If contractors exceeded their authority, that is not my responsibility. I have documentation showing I only authorized legal acquisition procedures. Agent Chen produced a tablet. We have recordings from your encrypted phone, conversations with Deputy Martin about accelerant placement, conversations with Judge Hendricks about ensuring favorable rulings, conversations with your regional security director about making Dalton Merrick's situation untenable. Your legal assistant provided access to your communication systems. Everything you have done over the past 3 weeks has been documented by federal investigators. The younger agent, a man in his late 20s who Dalton now recognized as the voice from the phone calls, stepped forward. I spent 2 years watching this company destroy families and communities while calling it business development. My father lost his ranch to them in Wyoming. They used the same playbook. I joined Apex to find evidence, and I found decades of it. Corporate conspiracy, bribery, fraud, and evidence suggesting 7 murders across 4 states connected to property acquisitions. Victoria was arrested at 12:15 p.m. Deputy Martin and Judge Hendricks were taken into custody simultaneously in coordinated raids. The sheriff resigned within hours when wiretap evidence revealed his involvement. Apex Mineral Holdings faced federal charges under RICO statutes. Their executives indicted, their mineral rights acquisitions frozen pending investigation. The 1942 transfer of Dalton's property was voided when forensic analysis confirmed the signature showed signs of duress, and the notary seal had been applied posthumously to a document signed by someone who was already dead when it was filed. Dalton received full mineral rights along with his surface ownership. He chose not to mine. Instead, he established a conservation easement protecting the land permanently, while using his settlement from Apex's eventual bankruptcy to expand the ranch and help other property owners fight corporate intimidation. Iris opened a legal aid practice specializing in mineral rights disputes, funded by evidence she had collected over 8 years. The informant, whose name was Michael Gaines, Victoria's nephew, who had taken the job specifically to expose what his family had become, testified in 17 separate cases that sent 12 Apex executives to federal prison. Dalton stood on his porch 6 months later, watching sunrise over land that was finally, completely, legally his. His left arm still ached sometimes, but the phantom pain had lessened. The drilling rigs were gone, the survey markers removed. The silence was natural again, filled with birds and wind and the sounds of a ranch that would never be threatened by the machinery of corporate greed. He had bought this land seeking refuge from a world that had broken him. In defending it, he had found something stronger than escape. He had found the will to fight for what mattered, and the proof that even against overwhelming power, truth documented with care and courage could still win. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another gripping tale where ordinary people face extraordinary challenges in the modern American West. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you stories like these. Your support means everything to us.